depression. Beautiful. All right, let's watch. That's kind of nice.
Wanna know how I got these scars? Well, I'm the Joker, baby.
I'm the Joker, baby.
Hello, beautiful.
Miami is the new Gotham. It deserves a better class screen alone.
Okay, the first thing you should know about any Rubik's Cube is that they're easy. Any moron, jackass, or joker could solve one. Sorry, what? What?
You know, we're living in a society. We're supposed to act in a civilized way.
I don't want your sympathy. Fuck your help! Everyone's an expert on everyone else except their fucking selves.
What do you get
I don't think so.
when you cross
I think
a
we're
mentally
done
ill
with you.
loner
That's
with a
it.
society that abandons him and thinks him like trash?
So several years ago, I made, I guess at the time, my most controversial video. This is a very early primordial state for the channel. It was titled Edgelord Movies and the Men Who Love Them. I don't know. I mean, I know exactly what I'm about to talk about. I know my shit, but just knowing the ways that YouTube videos and social media and internet communities work, I wonder if this will be received in the way I hope it will. And really, it was just a critique of sad white people movies or sad white men in general. In it, I discussed the long-standing tradition of the edgelord character archetype and discussed the type of men and boys who are attracted to these type of films and why they're attracted to them. This topic and issue has been one I've returned to in some form or fashion multiple times on the channel. For one, is one I somewhat relate to, being, I guess, a recovered edgelord myself who grew up loving movies like Equilibrium, V for Vendetta, and Fight Club.
The middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. You have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives.
But more significantly, this is an area I studied in graduate school, where I did analyses on spree shooters, gaming culture, internet subcultures, etc. And this is because I've always had an interest and really a heart for the type of challenges and issues that face young boys who are, for whatever reason, socially marginalized and maladaptive to that experience of marginalization. Most of the time, and throughout most of my career on YouTube, I find myself wanting to be empathetic, some would say overly empathetic to this population, because I see the good and possibilities within them. I see the pain with them, and I see myself within them. And I genuinely don't think much is gained by mocking them or making them punchlines or targets for derision. At least not much is gained in the form of actually addressing their problems or the problems that they present. And for the most part, this has been a palatable through line in the times I've talked about this population. I'm still very proud of the breakdown I did of the edgelord psyche in my first Manosphere video. I'm super happy with my Incels Make the World Go Round video, which I think was basically the spiritual follow-up to that whole series. And I think I even did a good job in my male desirability video, even though I know some did not appreciate my be yourself advice at the end. I'm not a dating relationship advice guy, y'all. I apologize. It is what it is. Overall, I think I've been as much of a gentle guiding hand to a vulnerable population of young men as possible from my specific standpoint. In fact, I've done it to my own detriment, as my channel has become quite the sausage fest over the years, and my affinity to leave myself open to engaging with these populations has also left me open to criticism and at times resulted in some negative experiences. I bring all this up at the beginning of this video to say a certain type of person that has actually watched me relatively regularly and come away with the idea that I'm just a male feminist who hates men or misandrist or whatever other words you all want to make up and is not interested in helping this population and just wants to point and laugh at the misanthropic edgelords like everyone else does. You can disagree with me on some of my takes, of course, but to paint me as the grifting misandrist is just not a criticism I'm going to take to heart. You can't have watched me with an open mind and come away with that unless you're the type that is so stuck in that headspace that you really shouldn't be watching me in the first place, because I'm just not where you need to be right now. But if you are like that, or hopefully a little bit further along than that, this video is kind of for you. See, while I'm very proud of my track record and efforts on this topic with this population, I've also become somewhat frustrated, maybe even disillusioned by how intractable some of these folks are, and how for some it seems like no matter how nice or gentle or logical or thoughtful the message or messenger is, they just won't hear it. They just don't get it. Maybe they don't want to get it at all. And after a while, you just want to say, fuck them. Fuck these knuckle-dragging, neck-bearded, dry dick, bad skin having, no holes getting, keyboard warrior, bitch-ass, punk-ass, bet you not gonna say it to my face ass, incels, nig cells, right cells, curry cells, and everything in between, motherfuckers. All of y'all motherfuckers in my comment section, subtweets, DM, and especially on Reddit, eat a dick, like, share, and subscribe. If it hasn't been made clear before, I'm making it clear now that going forward to a certain portion of that population, I'm not the person to help. For those super stuck in that worldview, the path out isn't going to start with me. I've moved past being annoyed, and I'm just going to focus on those who are here to learn and actually grow. And if you have to, go through, I don't know, an Abba and preach phase before you get to me, cool. That may have seemed mean to some of y'all, and it may have been a little excessive. I may have been having a little fun there. A little trolling, as you guys like to say. Just getting some lulls. Is lull still a word? I've lost touch. I don't know. But I'm actually not alone in that sentiment. As it turns out, I seem to be maybe even late to the party, because in the last year, multiple iconic figures or creators of edgelord adjacent media have also came to the same realization that they maybe just shouldn't care about what you guys think anymore. And it's been really interesting, in fact, maybe even satisfying to watch some of the worst fan bases in media get that sudden sinking feeling on how they've been wrong about something the whole time. And I want to explore that in this video. I want to look at 3 specific, very iconic in the moment, red pill, right-wing, edgelord adjacent pieces of media, and how they've given up on being overly empathetic in their discussion of male pain and edgelord ideology and other vaguely right-wing behavior, and just turned into overt declaration of edgelord's bad and we don't care anymore. What does that mean? Why is that important? And maybe what laughs are there to be had at the expense of these people? So let's get started. Let's define a few terms and review a little literature out the gate so that those of you unfamiliar with the subject matter can get somewhat grounded with the rest of us. And for me to level set a bit for the forthcoming, I'm sure, very civil and a completely nuanced conversation that I know will come in the comment section. Of course, nobody's going to leave a long comment in the comment section before watching at least the first 15 minutes of the video, right? Right? You're going to watch before you comment? I'm not going to have to reply that to anyone. Let's see. According to dictionary.com,
an edgelord is someone on an internet forum who deliberately talks about controversial, offensive, taboo, or nihilistic subjects in order to shock other users in an effort to appear cool or edgy.
Going further, in their paper Digital Games as Vehicles for Extremist Recruitment and Mobilization, scholars Andrew Newhouse and Rachel Cower had this to say.
Expressing a hateful or heinous sentiment, and, in the light of pushback or criticism from others, suggesting that the things they were saying are in jest. While true intent among griefers and edgelords is hard to assess, evidence suggests that these behaviors have contributed to widespread normalization of hateful language in gaming spaces as part of the culture of games.
As this paper alludes to, the edgelord is a nebulous catch-all term for a problematic, predominantly white population, but it could also be described as like the alt-right or neo-fascist, Nazis, red pill spaces, incels, like that whole community of problematic white boys all in one spot. But for the sake of like clarity, which there is no perfect clarity for this group, because some groups can be described by like 2 or 3 of those terms, but not the other 2 or 3. And of course, they all want you to know that they're specific special snowflakes and that you shouldn't call one something that's related to the other. I'm just gonna call them edgelords and other things interchangeably throughout the video. So just roll with me here. Because all of these groups tend to have a high affinity for this specific edgy Sigma male archetype in their media. This paper goes on to discuss an important reason why this highly unique and online population is important to pay attention to. They go on to say,
extremist groups have the capacity to build large, sophisticated, consistently evolving networks on gaming platforms. They can also exploit the mechanics of the games themselves to build propaganda and strengthen extremist identity, often in plain sight.
All of this coalesced with what is now a large and very much growing body of research on what I think is best described as a pattern of antisocial online behavior that on occasion does spill out into real-world consequences in the form of doxing and harassment campaigns. And then the most rare and extreme examples, school shootings and spree shootings at malls or grocery stores, or maybe even black churches.
We want to move now to the dramatic moments in the courtroom as Dylan Roof's chilling and disturbing confession to killing 9 people inside a South Carolina church is played for the jury. At times, Roof was laughing during his confession, and ABC's Steve.
However, it's important to understand that the most typical negative outcome for this behavior is just young, predominantly white guys on the internet being little shits and developing more intense antisocial behavior and beliefs. And that behavior and those beliefs often contribute to further isolating them, which further deteriorates their own mental health outcomes and makes them susceptible to other negative health factors.
Joey is 23 years old. He doesn't have a job. He's not in school. On a given day, he may not get up from his chair, where he sits sometimes for 2 days straight, smoking cigarettes and running chat rooms.
Honestly, I feel more real here, sitting in front of the computer. When I go outside, I almost depersonalize a little bit and feel like I'm playing a video game.
Spree shootings and school shootings, while awful, are very, very rare, and edgelords are annoying online, but if you cultivate your own social media and online activity effectively, you can avoid spaces if they exist when that's the case. For the most part, the edgelord's greatest risk is to themselves. So why is this significant to media? Well, for the most part, the development of edgelord behavior is often a reaction to poor social efficacy in their environment and community. This can be due to a multitude of factors such as poor social skills, mental and behavioral health challenges, poverty, niche interests, neurodivergence, physical unattractiveness, troubled home lives, etc. Or a combination of those features, which lead to antisocial behavior and can make a variety of escapist experiences attractive to them, i.e. media, TV, video games, comics, etc. Is your day-to-day school life a struggle? Is your home life traumatic? Then imagine yourself as a protagonist in your favorite anime or power fantasy video game, or John Wick.
They know you're coming.
Of course. But it won't matter.
Further, you can mark your online presence with these avatars as a representation of your interests and beliefs so that others will find you, and then suddenly you have a community of edgelords, which is a key element to this behavior that is under discussed, but I did touch on that in Incels Make the World Go Round, so I won't go over that again here. The media that attracts these types of young men is what I'm gonna call Sigma-coded, i.e. coming from that Sigma male meme that got hot a couple of years ago, that actually, if you think about it, isn't really a new thing. The Sigma male meme and concept may seem like a silly online thing, but it kind of perfectly codifies a lot of the aesthetics and internal logics of this type of media. The Sigma male, for those who don't know, is this silly, but to many super serious combination of traditionally idealized masculine traits and antisocial traits, constructed, in my opinion, as a coping mechanism for the aforementioned young men with poor social efficacy to create an image of traditional masculinity that they can reasonably aspire to. A lot of people say, well, this was just a meme and a joke, but what you'll find with this population is that they're always trying to hide the more concerning and heinous elements of those communities, and it's just jokes, it's just memes, until you see that it's most definitely not from their behavior.
Sigma males are the wild cards of the social hierarchy. Unlike alphas who might resort to aggression or betas who often back down, Sigmas operate on a different wavelength entirely. These men don't follow a predictable playbook. They're adaptable, resourceful, and often catch others off guard with their approach to problems.
Sigma males are traditionally masculine in their outward appearance, but also internally they are stoic, cold, and disinterested in typical social activities such as intimate relationships or even friendships. They are lone wolves who run apart from the pack, and the wolf has, much to the chagrin of friend of the channel, Super Eye Patch Wolf, become their spirit animal and symbolic of what the Sigma male really is. As I alluded to earlier, a lot of commentators on this topic and even some researchers look at this concept as a new phenomenon, but in my opinion, it's really just a new useful term for an image and concept as old as America itself. The individualistic nature of American culture breeds the sentiment needed for this lone wolf stoic image of masculinity to become idealized. If you look at media going decades well before the Sigma male meme, you see the presence of this sentiment. Many point to Taxi Driver in 1976 as the quintessential Sigma male protagonist, but I think you can see Sigma-coded characters earlier in movies like Easy Rider, Network, A Clockwork Orange, and probably tons of Westerns up to that point.
You're
bring a horse for me?
Well, looks like we're shy of one horse.
You brought too many.
And it's even in our literature, whether we're talking about, I don't know, Don Quixote or Holden Caulfield from A Catcher in the Rye, which, like, has a legacy within this culture.
Bought a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, signed it to Holden Caulfield from Holden Caulfield, and wrote underneath that, "This is my statement," underlining the word "this," the emphasis on the word "this."
And yes, it should be noted that these characters are almost always straight white men, as this identity has always been most closely associated with that group, and that group's response to social ostracism, and if you want to throw in the leftist lens, alienation from self and body. That said, although it seems to be a uniquely white phenomenon, I'd argue that there are also black versions of the sad white guy movie trope, just like there's black versions of the impossible white guy movie trope. Movies like Menace to Society, Baby Boy, Antoine Fisher, Creed, books like The Invisible Man, all of them definitely have main black male characters who are still Sigma coded in different forms of fashion. Now, race changes a lot of other dynamics within those books and films and video games, but the core aspect that attracts a specific type of viewer remains the same.
This isn't about bringing them back or even exacting some street justice. It's about making that bastard feel what it's like to lose everything. Watch as I take it all away from him.
In many ways, the Sigma male is a reimagining of the outlaw or anti-hero archetype who is railing against social norms that they have noticed, or really all of us should have noticed, don't work and aren't right for a lot of people.
We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad.
And in this, the framing of the Sigma male edgelord coded character has a lot of positive attributes as well, as they're fighting against unjust systems. And so you see heroic Sigma coded characters like Batman, Wolverine, and the aforementioned John Wick, who are at their core heroic or good, despite their antisocial, often anti-hero and anti-establishment traits.
I killed those people. That's what I can be.
No, you can't. You're not.
I'm whatever Gotham needs me to be. Call it in.
But that's kind of the problem. Travis Bickle is not a good guy. He is not depicted as a good person in his movie, and it should be understood by anyone who watches him that this is not what you want to be like. However, he behaves in a way that is very similar to Wolverine and Batman and John Wick. And we spend as much time understanding and empathizing with how he became who he is as we do with characters who are obviously coded as being heroic and righteous in their acts. And that can become confusing. And if not confusing, then at least blurry to those who are struggling with the balance of these types of identities and which type of behavior is more admirable and where they might land ideologically. And considering where some of them do land and what behaviors they do exhibit, contributing to enriching this specific social identity of the Sigma male, the edgelord, the lone wolf, whatever you want to call it, not really a good thing for society as a whole. In the introduction to their thesis on Sigma males, media studies scholar Matteo Valdivia writes the following about what Martin Scorsese, the director of Taxi Driver, thought about it some almost 40 years later.
In describing Taxi Driver, 1976, he highlights main character Travis Bickle's loneliness and his dangerous antisocial behavior. Scorsese makes the chilling observation that today, the psychological and emotional state embodied by Bickle is a tragic norm. Every other person is like Travis Bickle now. After nearly 50 years, the alienated, misogynistic, and racist character remains relevant not only as a representation of individuals in our contemporary moment, but also as an idolized representation for emergent and evolving masculine identities online.
This realization from Scorsese seems to be something that a few other creative minds are grappling with. that despite their intentions, whether it's to critique this type of behavior or to just tell an exciting story, they are contributing to that tragic norm. The audiences that are meant to reflect upon their own beliefs and behaviors are instead galvanized and encouraged by the images they see of these Sigma-coded characters. So in response, it seems that at least some creators have decided just to outright do away with nuance and open-endedness as to make sure that it's clear how we should view this behavior in these characters. Media literacy is dead, right? So let's make it obvious enough so that even an illiterate person can get the picture. Let's start with The Boys, greatly because it's probably the most obvious of the three properties I want to talk about today. Because The Boys has never been subtle. It's always been a criticism of capitalism and corporatism. That much was even true in the original, and mind you, far inferior comic. If you're a person that likes to read source material, my advice is stay away from the comic book. It's not like the worst thing ever, but it's kind of the worst thing ever. The Boys has also been a pretty naked, overt criticism of modern right-winged ideology, with Homelander, its main villain, being an explicit symbol of Donald Trump.
Some people, they want me to come out here and speak empty platitudes to you all. A little bit of corporate talk. But I don't want to do that. I can't do that. You want to know why?
Because I believe that what God wants me to do is get on over there, find the filthy bastards that masterminded this, whatever cave they're in, and introduce it to a little thing called God's judgment. That's what I think.
But even in its right-wing criticism, it's also shown some real guts and insight on its condemnation of liberal politics and how they're often just the other side of the same coin. The Boys is very popular, very successful, and, had a relatively wide, diverse audience in terms of politics because it was just too good to be avoided by those who are more right-wing in their ideology. However, something clearly changed in season 4.
Jewish space lasers.
Before Singer replaces us with a bunch of transgender illegals that will do everything.
Save the boogeyman shit for the idiots.
After having Homelander date a Nazi in season 3 and kill an innocent man in public, something that Trump said he could do himself and get away with it.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
It feels like the show was like, okay, these motherfuckers really aren't getting it, so we're gonna be even less subtle and more alienating to this right-wing fan base. So they made one of the more popular characters have a same-sex relationship, including explicit man-on-man kissing and implied sex, which makes a certain type of guy cover their face like an 8-year-old seeing boobs for the first time with their parents. One of the new villains is an on-the-nose representation of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, two right-wing politicians that are really, perfect for this type of show.
Are Jewish space lasers brainwashing you into joining their schools?
According to Q, now I'm saying according to Q, again, I don't have any proof of this, but we're talking about who is Q, so I'm going to tell you what he says. According to him, many in our government are actively worshiping Satan, or they call Moloch.
One of the more interesting changes was the introduction of another new villain, Sister Sage, a black woman that is really far more challenging than the show gets credit for. The lazy analysis is to see Sister Sage as a black woman aiding in literal white supremacy and think, oh, Candace Owens, or the usual tap dancing sellout black women that you see with the Republican Party. But really, Sister Sage is more comparable to another black woman seeking power, serving a similar role. But we don't have time for that right now.
Why would you do this?
To see if I could. Thank you. This was so much fun.
And this creates a lot of changes with the main villain of the show, Homelander. Homelander has always been a villain and overtly pretty awful.
Go ahead. Release it. Let's light this candle, huh? I mean, sure, I'll lose everything, but then I'll have nothing to lose.
But there was often a subtle element of humanity and struggle within Homelander's villainy. I get why some edgelords identify with Homelander because most of his problems and challenges are responses to his reality and his existence to which he had minimal control over. And this is a through line for edgelord Sigma male ideology and behavior. When you look at The Crow and John Wick and Walter White and Rick Sanchez, etc., you see that their response, while misanthropic, is at least in some specific way justified, even if it's negative. And we get that with Homelander.
So what if I took you to a house you'd never seen before, full of photos of parents you never met, toys you never played with, Hardy Boy books that you never read. And then I asked you how much all that fake fucking bullshit meant to you.
In earlier seasons, we're meant to empathize with him. We recognize his maternal wound and abandonment issues and the fact that he was raised in the lab with no parents, no family, and how this translates to his preferences with women.
Are you thirsty?
We see a lot of his psychopathy is related to his deep insecurity of his place in the world and his inability to connect with other people because of the way he was born and the fact that Vault Corporation clearly didn't care a lot about raising a well-adjusted human as opposed to a product.
Every year, she would bake me a birthday cake in the shape of a baseball diamond. And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details. Just like her.
Cut. Perfect. So great.
Most significantly, I think, is that up until this point, Homelander hasn't had much of a plan other than surviving and destroying his enemies. So because of all this, while I don't get how anyone can see Homelander as a good guy, I can understand why many empathize with the position he's in until Sister Sage ironically changes a lot of that. Unlike Homelander, Sister Sage has a more explicit agenda for how much she hates humans and what she sees as her vision for the future, and she pulls Homelander into that through a little bit of manipulation, a little bit of really just unearthing Homelander's actual desires and wants.
If you crush the masses, who builds your monuments? Who tongues your taint? No, the people will tear it apart themselves. Just gotta nudge them a little. Then you get to swoop in, be the one saving it.
Like Caesar.
Like Caesar.
And in doing so, we see Homelander start being a much more calculated, outright villain and lose any semblance of humanity or empathy that he had in earlier seasons. He still has mommy issues, control issues, insecurity, etc., but it's less prominent now. It's behind his explicitly villainous goals of world domination, possibly even genocide.
You'll no longer be beloved celebrities. You will be wrathful gods.
He's orchestrating murders of all kind, obsessed with aging to a gross degree, harming his own alleged son in the process. There's maybe even hints that he hopes to take his son's body, maybe. That's just my film theory prediction for next season. And you could argue that he's less interesting of a character possibly now, but he's definitely more effective and bothersome as a villain.
Victoria, if you stray even an inch off that path, I will make sure Zoe knows nothing but pain for the rest of her life, and I will send you a piece of her every year for the fucking rest of yours. There is no fail.
I know writers who use subtext, and they're all cowards.
The show figured out how to be even less subtle and openly try to alienate that portion of its fan base. And in response to its wokeness, there was a significant backlash. The show's fourth season was review bombed. The Reddit page for the show had huge fallouts with tons of people getting banned because they wanted to discuss the underlying politics, and I guess that wasn't according to their rules, which doesn't make any sense for a show that was inherently political from its first episode. So if that was their goal, consequences be damned, then they were very, very successful. The response to this show on Twitter and in the public discourse is that it's now gone woke, and that's been pretty entertaining for me, but it also begs a couple of questions that I'm gonna come to at the end. Let's get on to our next show. So if you're a regular follower, then you know one of my favorite punching bags on this channel is Attack on Titan. I've talked about it multiple times, and I went on record to say my most dedicated anti-fans hate me specifically for my criticism of the show, which is ironic because I've also went on record to talk about how much I love the show and how everyone should watch it despite its issues. Like, if you're a fan of the show and I'm a fan of the show, why the animosity, Jack? Why so much hate when we're all just Attack on Titan fans here? Except I think I understand it better than you, and that's okay. That should be fine. But instead, it seems like other fans of the show don't like that I have this opinion on the show's themes and flaws. And for some reason, that really, really frustrates them. I wish I could show you all the Reddit threads I've seen. I'll leave all my old Attack on Titan takes in the description for you to judge for yourself, as well as some videos that I think did things better than I did. For instance, I gotta show a little love to A Man of Many Cats, who I think did the most balanced and accessible assessment of the show's issues and how it handles war and fascism. His video was the first I watched that talked about the character Erwin Smith and how he's a direct reference to Erwin Rommel, a literal Nazi general, and how they match up in some uncomfortable ways that really make the whole "this is totally not a fascist show" argument not hold up as well as some of y'all think, but that's not the point of this video. Go watch it when you can. Instead, I want to return against my favorite punching bag from the show, Eren Yeager, and how the public discourse around him has evolved since the anime ending of the show happened earlier this year. In the first 95% of the manga and maybe 99.9% of the show, Eren Yeager is your typical shonen protagonist. He starts out as a plucky, spirited kid with an explicit goal. He has some really heavy barriers for reaching that goal, but eventually it seems like he's going to be on his way. And then there's a major time skip and he goes from being a plucky shonen protagonist to the coolest, most Sigma badass guy in the history of Sigma badassery. It's really, really bizarre. And it's where a lot of the fans or anti-fans of the show begin to split. And it's also when his popularity skyrockets with edgelords and with the ladies. He becomes the real Dark Triad Chad. And I say that not all that jokingly, as his mostly reasonable and responsible behavior in the first half of the show / manga devolves into the edgiest we live in a society behavior ever. He commits multiple atrocities, gets his friend killed, beats up another friend, inspires an overtly fascist uprising to which he does little to stop, and then ends with a literal global genocide, ending the society that caused him so much harm that results in the death of 80% of the world's population. In that regard, he's literally worse than Thanos. He literally killed more humans than Thanos did. No matter what your opinion on Eren or the manga's politics, this ending and the way it was handled with the character was very divisive, but for different reasons to different people. To some, the way Eren's behavior is depicted as worthy and heroic was a real head scratcher and really made people uncomfortable. And to others, there was still a lot of difficult to understand plot threads that didn't quite come together or weren't very satisfying. But to that specific crowd of edgy boys and horny girls, they hated the way that Eren went from a badass Sigma male to a crying, brain-broken, and confused beta cuck, all the words they like to use for, dudes with actual issues, in the course of a few panels. The original intention was to clearly criticize Eren's behavior and him as a character, how he was always meant to be a false hero, not an anti-hero, but a false one. That's straight from the mouth of the story's creator, Hajime Isayama, who alludes to the fact that he sees a lot of himself in Eren and struggles with the confidence of his own work.
I didn't think I could become one of the big ones. The only publisher which showed any interest was Kodansha. My self-esteem was so low. When my editor said he liked it, I remember thinking, what's wrong with this guy?
Eren is initially depicted as this visionary, driven, irresolute in his goals. A lot of people, not just the edgy ones, were attracted to him because of that. The idea of having that much fire and fight in you and not letting anything stop you from moving forward, along with those abs, right? I get the appeal. But it's also clear that Eren moving forward was bad for everyone else. And I think some of his fans didn't seem to get or care about this fact as long as they could project their fantasies onto the character. And in the end, when it's revealed that Eren's whole moving forward shtick was an act and he was actually being compelled and controlled by other forces outside of his own, that he was really just a lost little boy, scared at what was happening to him and what he was doing, that really undoes the Sigma iconography and ruined him in his fans' eyes. And you get why, because that is who they really are, and that's not what they wanted from that story and that character. And so this pissed off his fanboys to the point where they were claiming that it had to be fake or saying that Isayama was forced to rewrite it and all kinds of other stuff. And they really hoped that the anime version of the story would fix this obvious mistake and they would get a more satisfying version of the character they fell in love with. But instead, it just got worse.
No, break my heart. I don't want her to find someone else. I want to be her one and only love, even if she does get over me. I think it should take her 10 years at least.
In the anime version of the ending, they purposely downplay some of the more concerning messages, like when one of the characters thanks Eren for committing a global genocide. So they made some changes, but they didn't make the changes that this population wanted. Instead, they double down on showing Eren to be a confused little boy, a loser that really failed upward. He does all the same things he does in the manga, but they turn the pitiful tone of his explanations up even more. It's harder to watch than it was to read if you're coming from that specific standpoint. They even added this specific shot into it where Eren calls himself an idiot. This isn't a panel from the books. There's no shot that looks like this. This is a creative decision they made to frame Eren as the loser he truly is. Much like with the boys, they wanted to make sure no one was confused about what the message about this character actually was. Contrast this image of him sitting in the ocean of blood with the seashell or whatever this is to the way he was depicted some episodes back, and you get why people are pissed off. It's like they took Batman and turned him into Scrappy-Doo.
Correction! The new improved Scrappy!
Is Scrappy-Doo old to y'all? Scrappy-Doo's really fucking old. Needless, help me. Give me some Scrappy-Doo, but like for Gen Z, right here. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. My personal theory is that this came directly from Isayama. As I mentioned earlier, Isayama is on record saying that he identifies heavily with Eren. He's also on record saying that no one made him change the ending and that this is the ending he's always had in mind. Most interestingly is that he often said he never felt comfortable with his success. He struggled with feeling inferior, and when he first started Attack on Titan, he thought that it'd get canceled pretty quickly. And once it became a huge phenomenon, he was shocked, confused, and in many ways horrified from his own success.
可能性が 80% だったんで、その 20% の生き残りになることが目標だったんで、あと絵が下手だったんで、それは難しいだろうと。打ち切りにならないことも難しいだろうと思ってました。こんなになるとはとても思ってませんでした。ニューヨークまで来るとは思ってませんでした、本当。
Much like Eren, a lot of people looked at him as this visionary figure making amazing works, which to be fair, he really was, but he saw himself as more of what we see Eren as in the ending of the manga and anime. And again, for your stereotypical edgelord who fantasizes about this, who wants this image to aspire to, having the plan and the power to enact that plan, having the power to destroy or maybe even recreate a society that better fits who they are, that is what Eren did, and they just kind of shit all over it. I have a little more empathy with these guys more than the right-wingers with the boys, because again, the boys was not subtle.
Are Jewish space lasers brainwashing you into joining their shuls?
But Attack on Titan at times was, or at least required more analysis to see what was really happening. But Attack on Titan also has the problem where they don't really commit to their themes. You can't try to present an anti-war, anti-military message while also having the epic military battles with Sakuga-filled moments of badassery. A lot of regular viewers don't get the intentions and will be angry or at best confused when you take their main protagonist who's been shown like this for several years and then suddenly show him like this.
I don't want her to find someone else.
So despite my antagonism for the community, I do feel for them because it does feel like a bait and switch. But it's not the biggest bait and switch that happened here. Let's talk about the most recent Joker. Let's get to the reason why this video was made. Let's talk about the Joker, or Joker 2. Fuck it. I should have looked up how to pronounce that before I started filming, but I don't care. The movie doesn't deserve it. There's a ton to say about the entirety of the Joker character apart from the two most recent solo movies. As a nerd who grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's interesting seeing how this character has become bigger and bigger and bigger over the last 20 years in pop culture and gone from this campy and over the top, low-key queer-coded character that was beloved but not iconic and idolized as he is now, the legend that is the Joker. Some of that low-key probably has to do with late capitalism, but mostly I think it's from the undeniable high point, which was Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight movie, which gave us the most popular rendition of the character, possibly of all time, in Heath Ledger's Joker.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
And the legend of this performance was only made even more prominent when Ledger suddenly died not long after playing the role.
The actor Heath Ledger was found dead today in an apartment here in New York City. He was just 28 years old. Which
I think he won a Grammy for, editor correct me, and showed a picture of him winning a Grammy or show me looking dumb, whichever one is correct. But this is not to say that the character's chaotic evil elements were not popular before then, because we have something like The Killing Joke, which has always been one of the most iconic Joker stories, even if it actually isn't that good. And at least to me, the biggest reason why the Joker is popular comes from him being a focal point of arguably the best piece of Western animation ever in the Batman animated series that started in the early 90s.
Say, don't I know you? Sure, Bruce Wayne. Ah, so this is how your family made all those billions.
All this to say, the Joker is an amazing character and a versatile one who, if I'm honest, is low-key made worse by the weird fan base he developed after the Dark Knight movie because he stopped being this versatile character and started being just the edgelord version of himself.
Think it's time for you to take a seat, Batman.
Like, I will die on the hill that the Joker the world needed the most that we didn't get was Jared Leto's Joker. I think Jared Leto's Joker would have been like the perfect version of what the Joker really needed to be to bring a lot of this toxic edgelord shit back down to the ground. I think he was seen as so unpopular partly because he was kind of a slap in the face of that toxic edgelord nonsense instead of giving us what the Joker really would be in real life if, like, look at Dax, okay? The people that are still acting like that Joker right now. Anyway, no shade, Dax. I'm sorry. That was a little shady. I don't know if Dax deserves that. Ooh, let alone Dax, Diddy. Like Diddy's Joker cosplay a couple of years ago.
Hey, don't touch me. You're a clown! You don't like me, you motherfucking front. Get to it, bitch.
You see which Joker he picked. I'm just saying, Jared Leto's not looking so bad right now. What do you do when a side character is arguably more popular and compelling than the hero he shares a story with? Well, if you're Warner Brothers and you're fucking stupid, you give him his own movie, of course. And that gave us a Joker film in maybe 2019, 2018, which was very divisive, but unequivocally a success in the box office. And critically, I think it was nominated for plenty of awards. Some simply appreciated a good and interesting film with some homages, some would say outright burglaries of other better films from director Martin Scorsese, such as The King of Comedy and the aforementioned Taxi Driver. And it had, at least in spirit, an overall good message as it attempted to critique and analyze the Joker's appeal to that specific type of young man who feels put upon and betrayed by society and finds a sense of liberation and inspiration with the chaotic sociopathy of the Joker. The first Joker movie understood that it had an audience locked in to see what it had to say, to see what it was going to say directly to them. And it wanted that audience to feel seen and heard within the film, even as it attempted to criticize and preach to that audience. Joker was supposed to be empathetic, but fundamentally a negative depiction of that type of ideology and what that ideology leads to. Arthur Fleck, the original, Joker of that universe, is meant to be seen as pathetic and detached and broken and hurt.
All I have are negative thoughts, but you don't listen anyway. I said, for my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed.
And yes, we should empathize with that experience and that disposition and seek ways to address those problems at a societal level. But overall, we need to show that that response is wrong. Arthur Fleck was dealt a horrible hand in life, and it's hard to see him struggle through it with so little help to keep him moving forward and keep him from breaking down. And when he does break down and give in to his delusions and anger, you understand why, and you empathize with the horrible things he does, but you're not supposed to admire and idolize those things. And that, as I'm explaining this entire video, does not work with that core audience.
You think men like Thomas Wayne ever think what it's like to be someone like me? To be somebody but themselves? They don't.
I remembered watching the movie in theaters and being frustrated because, unlike some others, which, to each their own, I admit the film was very enjoyable. It was well done on a lot of levels, even if it was stealing some of its best parts from other better movies. I wanted to like it, but I knew enough because of my experience and research that the population the film was aimed at would not get the message at all and would become what they became in the preceding years. The Joker is a perfect example of how the angry, sad white man story doesn't work. It makes the mistake of trying to criticize something while making it look either completely justified or incredibly cool or both. Again, the main characters in Breaking Bad, Falling Down, Taxi Driver, Fight Club, American Psycho, and so on. All of these movies purport to say, hey, this is bad, but also, hey, this is badass. And while you here watching me surely are smart enough or, aligned enough with certain political ideology to balance these two elements, many others, especially those who probably need to hear this message the most, don't have that balance and don't see this part of the equation. Arthur Fleck as the Joker in this movie gets to enact brutal and in the eyes of the film, somewhat righteous violence against his bullies and tormentors and society as a whole. And his one inarguably unprovoked and unjustified act of wanton violence is paired with an epic speech that basically boils down to, we live in a society where he blames society for the senseless violence that he enacts, literally.
Oh, why is everybody so upset about these guys? If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. But these guys, what, because Thomas Wayne cried about them on TV? Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy.
And then after this, he gets multiple iconic scenes where he's framed as a hero. Now, maybe these are delusions, maybe they're not. We don't quite know as the movie doesn't decide to tell us this. With the most egregious one to me, where he dances on top of a cab surrounded by other people who are like-minded, idolizing him. And yes, after this, he does finally get caught and sent to jail, but he does it with a smile, feeling like he's accomplished something significant. And I know I said that, spree shootings and senseless violence that comes from this specific nebulous group of people is rare, but the people that commit those acts of violence, this is how they imagine things happening when they plan it out. I'm gonna come back to this a little later because you're gonna be surprised how this video ends. But the common criticism to people who critique Joker and films like it is that we don't have good media literacy and that somehow we don't understand that it's not supposed to be idolized the way it is. And again, I wanna be clear, this is not an issue of media literacy. I know what the message is supposed to be. I get it, you get it, but if you look at the tweets for people looking at Joker 2, those people clearly didn't get it. And there's an argument to say that this isn't their fault, but the fault of the creators. They don't want to be as challenging to this right-wing ideology and iconography as they say they do. Otherwise, the problem population that likes those stories that are supposed to be criticized within them wouldn't love them uncritically and probably wouldn't watch. Media analysis and comprehension isn't just understanding what a piece of media is saying, it's also understanding what that piece of media is doing. And what a piece of media is saying and doing can often be very different. It's not just knowing what the creator is trying to tell the audience, it's understanding what the audience is actually going to be told. Like, I'm sure the directors and writers that made Crash, the 2004 Academy Award-winning movie, they probably thought they were making the anti-racism opus that white audiences lauded it for. But when I watched it and I saw a black woman that had to hug and rely on the racist crooked cop that sexually assaulted her in front of her black husband who did nothing, I didn't get anti-racism from that movie, and most black people didn't. So intention doesn't always match or change impact. So when it came to Joker, the first one, with edgelords and red pillars and sigmas and all the other, that nebulous group, they did not get the criticism of that worldview from that movie. They got a reinforcement of that worldview. And it seems to me that Todd Phillips took that personally. The very idea that this movie had a sequel had to be somewhat galling to Phillips, who before now was best known for the Hangover trilogy, which, while the first one was good, the final two seems to devolve into this weird, mean anti-humor.
I made love to a man with movies.
I don't know a lot about Phillips, but what I get from him is that he wants to be seen as a real director and not just the guy who created the Mr. Chow character.
Funny fat guy falls on face.
I can't call it on how that should work for him, considering the spottiness of his film catalog. Either way, it's clear that he had a score to settle in his head when directing The Joker 2. I've personally floated the idea that the movie is bad on purpose. I don't know if I'll hold on to that take that much going forward, considering that the movie is $200 million and it's like, who would allow that to happen? But again, we are talking about Warner Brothers, and they are one of the most awfully ran movie studios in existence right now. Don't forget that they vaulted a fully finished movie that people seem to like just to write it off their taxes, among other things. But then you do have reports that Phillips wanted nothing to do with the DC production universe and didn't really report at all to James Gunn during the filming. It was also not screened in a lot of ways before its initial release. So whether or not you think it was bad on purpose, it definitely purposely wanted to alienate its core audience in the way it was done. At a minimum, regardless of what you think about this movie, you have to understand that aside from a couple of really tacked on feeling elements, it does not want to be seen as a comic book adjacent superhero world movie. It does not play into that world much throughout the film.
That it was sort of an anti-comic book movie, so to speak. That it was a character study, a deep dive, and really a movie, that explored mental illness, that explored compassion, that explored all these sort of things we wanted to do under the guise of a comic book film.
In fact, I'd argue it does a lot of things to purposely alienate itself from anything related to those types of movies. First and foremost, for no apparent reason, Joker 2 is a musical.
Get ready for the judgment.
And not even just like a musical, like with all the good parts about a musical. Like it's not like Chicago or Hairspray or Little Shop of Horrors where there's these big, upbeat, fun musical numbers with large sets or dances or anything like that. The music is all the croony, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett type stuff that I guess Lady Gaga also is into. The vocal performances from Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix aren't great. Joaquin Phoenix is not a great singer and nobody else sings. So not only do you know part of the audience is going to be like, oh my God, it's a musical, that's so soy, and they're not going to like that part of it.
I hate musicals. I do not like anything with interpretive dance. I find it very cringy and it makes me upset.
Anybody that might like a musical is still not going to be entertained because it's just not a fun musical or even a dramatic musical like Les Miserables. I don't know what the music is for other than to just be different and artsy, which it still doesn't do well. And again, it makes me think that there's a purpose to how alienating that would be, because there's this really like meta moment toward the end of the movie where Joker is trying to talk to Harley Quinn and she starts singing and he's like, hey, look, can you stop singing for a second? I really need to talk to you like a normal person. Could you just stop singing? And I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh, but I did. But even beyond that overtly weird choice, the movie also chooses to basically say the first movie isn't real. Like the Joker from that movie, the way that movie ended, doesn't exist in this movie. This movie starts out with this animated like short where Arthur Fleck as the Joker seems to be being controlled by this shadow figure. And that was nowhere in the first film. And the film kind of revolves around this idea that Arthur Fleck is one person and the Joker is this alternate like identity that he doesn't have control over. And that's part of his legal defense. And like a psychiatrist trying to say that, but then the Joker refused it at the end. And I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to think other than to look at the events of the first movie as if they don't count. As such, in this movie, he's barely the Joker or even any remnant of the Joker. In the rare moments that he is the Joker after Lady Gaga, who I guess is Harley Quinn, but really not at all, again, outside of name, which is sad. She convinces him to try to be the Joker again, and he does it, and it sucks. It's cringe. He's being his own lawyer.
Also, don't do this to yourself. It isn't you.
It isn't me. So you don't think this is me? Well, maybe. You don't know who I really was.
He talks in this goofy Southern accent, and I don't know if we're supposed to think this is cool or see it for what it really is, which is weird and cringe. And he tries to do like Joker antics, but they're not well written. Are they not well written on purpose because we're supposed to recognize that Arthur Fleck is a loser, which I think that's kind of how it's supposed to be? Or is it not well written because the movie isn't well written? Either way, the experience is the same. It sucks. The film climaxes in this moment where you think you're about to get another big "we live in a society" speech at the end of this trial. Yeah, the whole movie is basically them putting the Joker from the first movie or the first movie itself on trial. And yeah, that's a choice. So he sits down like he's about to make this speech and then he just doesn't. He says, I'm not really the Joker. I'm just a broken man with a lot of mental health issues. I don't want to be this guy. I just wish I could start over. I'm very sorry. And like, I wish every shitty anime avatar guy I've ever seen in my comment section or on Twitter would act like that, but it doesn't make for a good film. Like, as a final nail in the coffin to make sure that nobody is confused as to what the message of this movie is and how Todd Phillips feels about the fan base that came to love the first one. Chaos ensues at the end of the trial, and Joker has a chance to escape with two fans that idolize him for his antisocial behavior. So they're literally stand-ins for the fans of the original movie. They get him in the car, and they're escaping with him, and he's not going to go back to jail, and maybe he's going to go be the Joker. But I think the Joker here is Todd Phillips, and he hears the two acolytes talk about how they're going to tear things up and destroying society and all that stuff. And Joker has this look on his face like, man, fuck, y'all are weird. I don't want to be here. And he jumps out the car. He escapes from his own fans, from the fans of the original movie. And so when you look at some of the tweets about the Joker, about people walking out on the film, like, I don't know if bad on purpose is fair, but it definitely was a fuck you to that fan base. And I shouldn't laugh. But what else are you gonna do? And I wish I could keep laughing. I wish I could just take this moment to gloat about being right here, right? But then I tried to actually make a video out of this victory lap. So how's this for a plot twist? I'm wrong. This video started out as a B-sides where I would, do a victory lap on those previous takes on the topic after seeing the response in real life people. Like I don't think Todd Phillips or anybody that wrote The Boys saw my old Edgelord video, but I definitely feel like they felt there was a need to be more explicit and direct with their messaging so that they wouldn't be criticized the way that I tend to criticize this type of media. But as I wrote it, more ideas developed, and then I thought about the Attack on Titan thing, and I did a victory lap about that already. And this went from being a small filler video that I would do, waiting on the Diddy video to happen, and ended up being something that I couldn't finish. I found myself stuck in a way that I'm not used to when I write a video. Something about being correct here in my original criticisms of this media didn't feel like it should. Yes, I was right. Or at a minimum, the way I was looking at things seemed to be indicative of the way some of these creators were starting to look at things too. But that feels meaningless now that I'm thinking harder about what is actually happening here. Yeah, it's nice to dunk on right-wingers who don't understand media and are so bad at it, in fact, that the creators themselves had to spell it out blatantly so that even an idiot could see it. And yes, this doesn't change their mind, but it's at least fun to read, their angry tweets. But then something else hit me that almost made me kill this whole video. And to explain that, I want to talk about two more movies that are in this nebulous, sad white guy genre. These two movies are Nightcrawler starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Drive starring Ryan Gosling. I may have actually gotten these dudes mixed up, to be honest with you. They're darn near interchangeable. The movies are different, but even their posters are damn near the same. And both films follow morally dubious, Sigma male-coded, lonely, sad white guy protagonists that fight to survive and make sense of a world that has no real place for them, yada, yada, yada. I don't know how long this video is, but you know. Beyond that premise, the two films, though, are very different in how they engage with that archetype. In Nightcrawler, Jake Gyllenhaal's Louis Bloom character is presented to us in a way to explicitly remove his Hollywood good looks. His skin and hair are both oily and poorly kept, and his mannerisms and behavior present to us an over-the-top, low-key, autistically coded character who doesn't seem to have the ability to interact appropriately in social settings.
How about an internship, then? A lot of young people are taking unpaid positions to get a foot in the door. That's something I'd be willing to do.
I'm not hiring a fucking thief.
His performance is unnerving in every way. We're still intrigued by the story and the character, and it's a good film. I want to be clear that both of these movies I really enjoyed, but at no time are you watching Nightcrawler looking at Louis Bloom and saying, yeah, he just like me for real, even if he low-key is.
I didn't say that.
On the flip side, Gosling's character in Drive is arguably just as autistically coded, just in a less overt manner that's easier to digest. Instead, his detached behavior and similarly underdeveloped socializing abilities come off as cool. He's so cool, he doesn't even have a name in the movie. He's just the driver the whole time. He wears a cool scorpion jacket. It has cool driving gloves and cool driving skills and a really cool hammer that he uses to help, communicate to people his real feelings about how cool he is. And while if you're paying attention, with good media literacy, you might be thinking maybe this guy isn't so cool, the movie still doesn't want you to think too hard about that. even as you watch his very disturbing hyper-violence throughout the movie, where even he himself realizes maybe he's a monster and capable of having intimate relationships. Both movies make attempts to engage with that sad Sigma male whatever identity, but one is clearly more enamored and empathetic to this image than the other. One leaves no room, much like The Boys and Joker 2, for how the audience is meant to feel. Both are good, but only one is likely to develop a certain type of fan base. The thing is, while people with views similar to mine may be less critical of the way that Nightcrawler engages with this archetype, it doesn't matter either way to these right-wing edgelord type people in question. It won't stop them from ignoring the message of Nightcrawler altogether or ignoring subtext in Drive. It won't change their mind. It won't stop them from being assholes online. It won't stop them from recruiting and getting people to fall deeper into reactionary online spaces. From the angle that I present up until this point, this movie does things the right way, but what difference does that actually make? A few weeks ago, I saw a video from one of my new favorite problematic white boy streamer type guys. I have like a tier list of low-key problematic white guy creators that I watch, but I don't talk about too much because I don't know when they're gonna do some fuck shit. And so Tyler's kind of, he's a newcomer. He's getting up to that upper mid-tier area. So shout out to Tyler for now. We'll see how long this lasts. But West Side Tyler, aka SA Side Tyler, did a behemoth 3.5-hour video called Starship Troopers and the Death of Satire. And in it, he presents a very strong argument that Starship Troopers, the 1996 Paul Verhoeven film based on the intensely right-wing, if not outright fascist book of the same name by Robert Heinlein, he compellingly presents that that movie isn't the subversive satire of fascism that a lot of us media critics on the left like to say it is. Instead, he compellingly argues that Starship Troopers, the film, is arguably more effective as a piece of pro-fascist media than the book it's based on.
Starship Troopers is propaganda, not a satire of propaganda. Not even really satire. It is propaganda. You might say, the fascists don't know they're being made fun of. Aren't we so much more clever than them? They don't care. Verhoeven's Starship Troopers has a runtime of approximately 2 hours and 9 minutes, of which the FedNet scenes, where essentially all of the overtly satirical moments take place, comprise a total of 6 minutes and 13 seconds. That leaves us with 2 hours of a film that is non-stop action with a clear-cut message of us versus them, the good guys versus the bugs, done in the style of the most influential propagandist of the literal Nazi regime.
He then goes on to criticize the very nature of this type of endeavor, both in media and in media criticism. Just how many times will we point and laugh at the chuds? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's fun and cathartic, but it's also a limited use tool. And after watching his video, I realized why I was struggling to finish this one. Again, repeating myself. We know by now that when the edgelords and chuds and Nazis and red pillars and whomever else watch Fight Club or Falling Down or play Spec Ops The Line or Helldivers, they just attach to the thing they like that reinforces the ideology that they're connected to. And we either shout at them the parts that they miss, or we laugh amongst ourselves about how they're too dumb to get it. And that's fun, but it's important to engage with the fact that I don't think we're getting it either. My core argument up until this point has been that if the media allows itself to be misinterpreted, then we need to be critical of said media, regardless of what its intentions might have been, because said media is still reflecting a certain ideology, even if it's saying that it wants to criticize it. And I still feel like that's true to an extent, but I need to amend that because, ironically, having been proven right in this light forced me to see the limitations of that being the strategy to take on. Because here's an important point that I need to drive home that I've dabbled in, but not really solidified. The Boys season 4 is the worst season of the show.
Jesus.
It does a good job of being more critical about right-wing ideology, but to the detriment of it as a piece of media. It gets lazy and predictable and pointless at times.
The troll farms are already digging up fringe anti-Starlight content and injecting it into the mainstream. So far, Starlight's progressive jihad and hashtag arrogant white feminism are showing promise. We need the algorithm to find the most receptive users, then blast the articles to the top of their social feeds until 100 million people are outraged by Starlight for reasons they can't even explain.
And I'll still argue that Attack on Titan is good, right? But the changes they made to the end of the anime version don't fix the ending at all. It just makes it more galling and glaring how the character of Eren Yeager was written. And Joker, A Foy de la Lou, whatever, is the worst movie I've seen in theaters in years. It is genuinely really, really bad and boring and meandering and pointless, even as it makes points I agree with, and the first one made points I hated. At their core, all of these examples I presented still fail to do anything about addressing their flaws, if not just for the fact that they're weak pieces of media. Further, Fight Club is good. Taxi Driver is good. Breaking Bad is good. Rick and Morty, and yes, even the first Joker are good in their quality, regardless of the flaws in their messaging. So no, the response from creators shouldn't be to do what the Joker 2 did, or what The Boys Season 4 did, or what Attack on Titan did. If these media really wanted to address the audiences that misunderstood them, they should have first been good, and therein lies the question, can you make something good that still accomplishes the intended goal? And I answered that by talking about those other two movies, Drive and Nightcrawler. No, they still wouldn't get it. So if there's really no fixing that problem through the media, I'd rather watch something well-made and entertaining with bad politics than watch something poorly made and boring with good politics, especially if all I'd end up getting out of it is the smug satisfaction of being right. Because I gotta tell you here on the left, that smug satisfaction of being right is getting us killed. So what is an actual solution here? What is my updated and amended take on all this stuff? Should no bread tuber ever again make the X media is bad and here's why video? No, in fact, we probably still need more but better versions of that with maybe just some tweaks. In the conversation on the Signified Podcast channel, I talked to one of my mentors, Diallo Kenyatta. He makes this point that sharing knowledge and educating really isn't enough considering the state of affairs for our world right now.
So our problem is not lack of education. Our problem is we don't have counter indoctrination and counter propaganda. This is not simply about teaching a student. It's about waging intellectual and psychic warfare. If it was simply a matter of miseducation and I could just sit everybody around and simply tell them false facts versus fiction and present them with the evidence, that would be a very easy task. We have to be propagandists. We have to employ counter indoctrination. It's not a fair fight, and we should not fight fair.
Yeah, we definitely need to continue to deconstruct these stories and pull out their meanings and put them on display for everyone watching to see and understand better than maybe they would have without our help. But as Diallo speaks to here, we need counter indoctrination. We need counter propaganda. We need less stories about sad white men that save today with inherently right-wing antisocial behavior where we say, see, look how bad that is and look how good we are for noticing it. Instead, we actually need stuff where we imagine the world we're fighting to see coming into fruition and imagine battles we actually have to win that world. We need more stuff like Star Trek. Shout out to Jesse Gender. We need a world where they've already fixed so many of the problems that we suffer under now, and they're just adding new shit because they're traveling into space. We need more stuff like Sorry to Bother You and I'm a Virgo from Boots Riley, where revolutionary action is imagined, even if it's in absurd and bizarre ways. That's what we should be talking more about. The stuff that's actually good, not good actually. You get it? But that also requires a bit of reframing about the way us as creators and consumers think about media and media critics. One thing I had to understand while making this is that media reflects culture and society. It's a product of social attitudes, not a producer. The stories that we tell that include bad politics don't cause bad politics. They're the effect of bad politics. And we forget that when we do our analysis and explain why thing bad is bad. And that lends itself to an overinflated sense of the value of what we do and just being able to recognize the harmful messages in the media. We think because I or insert your favorite video essay is here says thing bad and here's why, that we have somehow solved the problem of the thing being bad. But that's not the reality. The reality is that we live in a society. And that society does produce media that is right-wing and edgy or maybe even quasi-fascistic, even when they're trying to critique those things. things. And we won't be rid of that flaw problem in our media until we are rid of that flaw and problem in our society. And that's a far bigger task than liking the right type of media or having the right take on a piece of media or watching your favorite video essayist break it down. But it is something you can do. And fixing that problem in real life requires real life action, organizing, civic engagement, mentoring low key. Like if you're really worried about the type of boys that are drawn into a Joker or Attack on Titan or whatever, talking to them directly when they're preteens and younger is the best way possible to make sure they're never following Andrew Tate and insert whoever else is here when they become teenagers. That's how that's actually accomplished, not sending them one of my videos. But we're getting off topic. So all you neck, bearded, dry dick, incel, nickcel, curry cells, yada, 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 who actually made it this far in the video, first off, thank you. Secondly, I'm sorry. I got a little carried away. It's still fuck you guys, of course, but let's focus on some commonality. Put your favorite sad white man movie in the comment section. Extra points if you explain it in the edgiest, most Sigma way possible. We'll have a big old edge off. We'll have a big old edge off in the comment section going forward. And maybe put your favorite deconstruction of one of those movies that you like. Like, for instance, I really love Aronofsky's queer reading of the Matrix films. That completely opened my eyes to a way different way of viewing those films. I went looking for a good Fight Club video essay on its queer themes, and I didn't see one. Like, the only one that I remember is like 10 years old from Rantasmo. Like, that's an OG video. And I feel like a lot of you haven't seen that one. It only has 40,000 views. And that shows you that we still need more stuff like that. The fact that Fight Club does not have an hour-long Fight Club is gay actually and here's why video, like I feel cheated. I feel cheated about that one. With that in mind, there's a great new video on a classic work of subversive media, the 2012 video game Spec Ops: The Line, done by fellow Nebula member Jacob Geller. Geller is one of those top-tier video essayists that if you like this type of content, I'm sure you'd appreciate. And if you really like Geller, you'll probably like the half or dozen or so videos he has on Nebula that aren't on his main channel just in the last 6 months. Yeah, Jacob Geller puts a lot of smaller niche videos on Nebula that aren't here on his YouTube page. Same thing for Maggie Mae Fish, T1J. In a perfect world, we put all our stuff on YouTube and not worry about it. But unfortunately, things don't work like that. Instead, we have to pick and choose carefully what goes on YouTube because of YouTube's rules about copyright and monetization, or just because some videos, such as my video about the queer coding of Tupac throughout his career, just won't find the right audience here. And for years, Nebula was the place for that content to be, uncensored, without like buttons or ad segments or algorithms to decide if you watch it or not. That is the original glory of what Nebula was. But I also want to mention that that's not what Nebula is now, or at least not just what it is. All that stuff is still true, but Nebula is changing. It's going from a place for all your favorite YouTubers to post their content ad-free, but now it's evolving into an outright independent film studio. In the last year or so, Nebula has made some tweaks to focus on giving its roster of over 200 talented creators the opportunity to think beyond YouTube videos. And in that time, we produced docuseries like Brody Deschanel's series on sex in film, or real-life lore series on military conflicts in the Middle East. We also have travel content and reality shows like The Getaway, or independent films like Jesse Gender's Identitize or Patrick Williams' Night of the Coconut. And that's just our first wave as we get the ball rolling on really becoming like the YouTube version of A24. But that ball is in your court. You can help us continue to be the most exciting space for independent content creators and get access to all that exclusive content ad-free by signing up using my promo code FD Signifier or by clicking the link in the description. We rely on you as the consumer to keep this ball rolling as we are completely independent. We're not owned by YouTube or Google or any other big tech company. It's just us as creators and you guys as the viewers. So help us keep things moving by joining us today. Thank you so much to Nebula for sponsoring this video. Thank you all for watching this. Don't forget to check out my Patreon as well as my other channels and my socials. That's pretty much it, y'all. Peace.
Trying to remember. I want to say it was something like either the border wall or the migrant crisis, or it was an explanation from
Oh,